against a Polish man, beaten up by a gang of up to 20 teenagers on Friday night. One of Poland's senior representatives here in the UK tells us he's seen an increase in complaints of racial abuse since the Brexit vote, as Porrick O'Brien now reports from Leeds.
At the weekend, a 28-year-old Polish man was chased up this street in Armley, Leeds, by a large gang of teenagers. When they caught him, 2 of them attacked. The rest watched. He was badly beaten in what police are describing as a hate crime. Worrying echoes of what happened to Arek Joswicz in Harlow. These the cases we hear about. Today, the Polish consulate in the northwest told us of a marked spike in reported hate crime since the referendum, and said even with the increase, it still represents just a fraction of the actual abuse. What does it actually feel like being on the receiving end of racism? In Armley, Leeds, we're about to find out.
You sound proper Yorkshire. Where did you move from Poland?
8 years ago.
Is that right?
Yes. I just grew up in here, to be honest.
Okay.
Because I went to high school, college, then university.
Alexandra now works for the NHS. We are interviewing her because her friend was assaulted by a group of teenagers outside her house at the weekend. They chased him for about a kilometre. He tried to get to his friend's house, but she wasn't in.
And they were literally beating him up in your front garden
they
here?
Were. Yeah, I had two big splashes of blood outside my door, so I was just frightened when I got home. I just couldn't believe it.
Where are they?
Just down here. You can see them.
2 of the group beat him up. The others stood around watching in what police are describing as a hate crime.
It makes me feel angry just because, you know, I think I'm not less than anyone else just because I'm Polish. I'm still a person. I'm still an individual who lives here, pays taxes.
At this point, we hear a screech of brakes and a car stops outside.
This is just my own.
What was that?
I don't know. I have no idea.
A group of youngsters listening to a conversation in a car.
They just shouted out,
Yeah.
Polish grass.
Yeah.
Is this something that you've experienced before in any
I
way,
have,
or
yeah.
in what way? What do you mean?
We had stones being thrown at our windows, and I've been sweared at many times.
Alexandra decides to call the police.
How many? About around 5.
4 or 5, yeah. 4 or 5.
Yeah.
After the call, in all its rawness, this is exactly how racism makes people feel.
That I am just not wanted here. Like I'm just not wanted over here.
And have you felt that before?
Well, I have, but I've tried to fight it off, you know, because at some point I just felt like I belong somewhere, you know, like whilst being at university or working on the wards, it just felt really good to belong to like a group of people who have the same priorities in life, you know, they want to help others. But, you know, when you get home and you have something like this happening, it just breaks your heart.
So that connection that you thought you had, you feel like you don't
It
have.
disappears, yeah. It just disappears.
But how has it though, Alexandra? Like, because there's lots of really good people as well, isn't there? And there's lots of, like, all the work that you've put in, the hours you've put in, that's not gone away, is it? And the friends you've made and stuff.
Yeah, well, it's true, but, you know, if I feel unsafe, what's the point in believing in something that, you know, you can't even convince yourself of? I don't feel safe anymore. I just thought.
Yeah. What did you believe in when you say you believed in something? What do you mean?
I just believed in, you know, belonging here, you know, like just feeling, you know, safe as if at home, living here. But now it just feels so different. I just feel like I just want to go back. Even though, you know, I got so used to this place, I just don't know what to think.
So just to put Alexandra's story in some sort of context, we spoke to the Polish consulate here in the northwest, and he told us that since the referendum in June, they're working on 17 reported race hate crimes, which thankfully doesn't sound like a lot. But he went on to say that in the preceding 12 months before the referendum, they dealt with a total of just 2. The other thing that's striking here in Leeds and also in Harlow over the last fortnight was that almost every single Polish person you talk to has either a story of their own or the story of a friend or a relative of racial abuse. So there's a real dislocate between those personal experiences on the ground and that which is reported to the police. And it's also important to add that, as well as the figures, which of course are important, the real existential pain of this is what we've just heard Alexandra talk about.
Porrick, thanks very much. Now, with opinion polls suggesting Labour is 10% or so behind the Tories, Jeremy Corbyn faces an extra burden with changes to the political map which could cut up to 25 Labour seats. The Independent Boundary Review's radical plans to redraw constituency boundaries have provoked a fierce political row over changes which could make it a lot harder for Labour to return to power, as our political correspondent Michael Crick reports.
The Commons is one of the biggest parliamentary assemblies in the world, 650 MPs. Ministers want to cut it to 600 and make their seats much more equal, within 5% of around 75,000 voters. So inevitably, some MPs will lose their seats.
It's right that having made savings elsewhere, MPs should be able to put their own house in order. This measure is going to save £66 million over the course of a parliament. That's quite a lot of money. And so we need to cut the cost of politics, and we need to do so by cutting the number of MPs.
David Cameron won last year's election with enough new MPs to get a majority of just 12. The Tory government would be more secure, though, with these boundary changes, less prone to defeats by backbench rebels. Labour will be the party worst hit, expected to lose between 20 and 25 seats in all. The Conservatives, it's thought, will lose between 10 and 15. The SNP, 6, and the Liberal Democrats, 3. That would give the Tories a comfortable majority of around 38, 3 times as much as now. Labour leadership challenger Owen Smith is one of several figures whose seat has been radically redrawn. Like lots of Labour MPs and Tories, he may have to compete with neighbours in a kind of musical chairs. George Osborne's under threat in Cheshire and may have to fight the backbench leader Graham Brady. Current cabinet ministers with problems include David Davis on Humberside, Priti Patel in Essex and Alan Cairns in Vale of Glamorgan. Other Corbyn critics that could lose out are Chris Leslie in Nottingham, Ian Austin in Dudley and Tristram Hunt in Stoke, all facing contests against Labour colleagues. But Jeremy Corbyn's crying foul.
The figures the Boundary Commission is working on are of December of last year. Since then, well over 2 million more people have joined the electoral register. We need a fair electoral system that guarantees equal representation of all constituencies. By using out-of-date figures, they can't do that.
Corbyn's own seat in Islington is redrawn a bit, which could mean him partly moving into Hackney and Labour neighbours in turn moving eastwards. But some local voters welcome a cut in the number of MPs.
It's probably a good idea if they're more equal, but again, it's how you slice the cake and who ends up where.
It's a lot of bums in seats and getting nice bit of money for nothing.
Well, that's not good for democracy.
It's not good?
No, I don't think so.
Why not?
Less representation. I think the more MPs, the better.
But talk of the new boundaries helping the left to deselect Labour MPs is probably overblown. Labour's existing rules on how to handle boundary changes are very much weighted in favour of helping sitting MPs. And with more than a dozen MPs now in their 70s, there are likely to be quite a few retirements. So it should be possible to accommodate most people somewhere. But if the left were to use its growing power in the party to change those rules and perhaps allow new entrants, then sitting MPs might have a lot more to worry about. Michael Crick, Channel 4 News, Hackney.
Well, with me now is Mark Harper, the Constitutional Reform Minister in the Coalition Government when this Boundary Commission was first established, and from her constituency in Hampstead, Tulip Siddiq, the Labour MP for West Hampstead and Kilburn, a seat which itself faces significant changes. Tulip Siddiq, let's start with you. It's quite hard to complain about the Boundary Commission, isn't it, because it's independent?
Look, I'm all in favour of making politics less expensive and creating equal constituencies. But what I'm not in favour is doing that at the expense of representation. And you've heard what Jeremy Corbyn just said. The list that the Conservatives are using, or if you say the independent people are using to create these proposals, are from last year. There's 2 million people in the country who are not accounted for in these proposals.
Let me put that. Let me put that direct to Mark Harper. The list you're using isn't up to date. It's not fair.
Well, I think the first thing to remember is that the current boundaries are from data that was from the year 2000, and if the proposals don't go through, or revised proposals don't go through, the next election will be fought on boundaries that were set on electoral registers from 20 years previous, which is clearly way out of date. Now, Tulip's point about the new people that registered for the referendum isn't a good one, because the 2 million extra voters were broadly spread across the country. 3/4 of seats increased in size by broadly the same percentages. So it wouldn't make a significant difference to the spread of seats across the country.
But why not avoid any controversy and use population rather than registered voters?
Well, it's much more relevant to use registered voters, because it's about how many people are eligible to vote in British elections. For example, if you use population, you'd be counting foreign nationals and people who aren't able to vote for MPs, and it wouldn't give you a proper sense of representation. We've always used registered voters in the past. That's the way the system's always worked.
Okay. Tulip Siddiq, isn't the real truth here that you're worried about your future, and particularly your own future, given that one Labour NEC member, the ruling committee member, said today that this would be an opportunity to select more loyal MPs who were loyal to Jeremy Corbyn?
Look, I'm standing in this seat, which was the Conservatives' #1 target seat last time. I'm not a stranger to challenges. I'm not scared of challenges. My problem is that we will be neglecting people, mostly young people, who are the 2 million people left off the list that they're calculating for these proposals. And I also want to call this naked gerrymandering. Let's call a spade a spade. Look at David Cameron. Just a few weeks ago, he put half of his Christmas card list in the unelected House of Lords. That cost £30 million alone. We're talking about the cost of politics. We can save money elsewhere, but let's not do it at the expense of representation.
OK, the Lords is a good point, isn't it? I mean, now the size of the Lords, 790 peers, I think, overwhelms the Commons, and will do even more so when these changes go through.
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, the Commons always gets its way because it's the elected House. But the second thing is, I'm not going to take any lectures from the Labour Party about the House of Lords. When I was a minister in the Coalition Government, as you pointed out, we brought forward proposals to reform the House of Lords, to make it democratic. The Labour Party refused to support the programme motion that would have been necessary to get that legislation through Parliament.
Well, let me put that
so
to Tulip
I'm not
Siddiq.
going to take any lectures from them about the House of Lords.
No lectures from you on the Lords, Tulip?
Well, I'm going to say that I think he should probably speak to his former Prime Minister, who spent £30 million alone putting members of his friends in the House of Lords. But also, look at the number of politically appointed special advisors. Since 2010, from the Conservative government, the cost is now £45 million. Look at High Speed Rail 2, £80 billion. Why don't we save money elsewhere? I really feel we cannot make constituencies equal, as they call it, and lose out on these 2 million people. In London alone, and I'm an MP in London.
But how much longer are you going to carry on being an MP in London?
More London MPs.
OK, but given what the NEC member, one of the NEC members said today, are you worried about being purged in favour of more loyal Corbynites?
The only thing I'm worried about at the moment is that the people in the most deprived areas of my constituency, like Kilburn, will not have fair representation. That's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about the 2 million people who are not on the list that the Conservatives are using. I'm not worried about purges, NEC or anything like that. I want to make sure I represent my constituents properly, and this naked gerrymandering has to stop.
OK. Mark Harper, just briefly, I mean, is this actually going to get through? Turkeys don't vote for Christmas. Are MPs going to put this through?
No, I think it will get through. And I mean, I reject that point about gerrymandering. The boundary commissions are independent. The Boundary Commission for England is chaired by a High Court judge. They're neutral people drawing up according to the rules set by Parliament. So it's fair and reasonable. And I think these proposals will go through and we'll have votes then of equal weight across the country, which is in the interest of voters.
Mark Harper, Tulip Siddiq, thank you very much for joining me. Now, it's day 2 of the crucial Syrian ceasefire, and it does seem to be mostly holding with very few civilian deaths reported. Russian aid trucks have managed to reach government-controlled western Aleppo, but there was no such relief for the rebel-held east, though, as the UN warned its convoys couldn't proceed without more assurances of safety. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent Jonathan Rugman reports.
In Aleppo, an eerie quiet. The first respite from bombing and shelling in months. Both rebels and the government reported truce violations, but there were no reports here of injuries or deaths. All is well and people are coming out onto the streets, said this street seller. No planes in the skies, thank God. A tentative calm then, though no UN aid has reached the rebel-held east since July, and nobody knows how far these 20 aid trucks crossing over from Turkey will get. The Turks say most of them were carrying food and flour. The Syrian government continues to say it will reject any aid Damascus hasn't agreed to, and the UN fears it may block deliveries again.
We need to enter an environment where we are not in mortal danger as deliveries, as humanitarian organizations delivering aid. So we need to see that materialize before we can move ahead.
By contrast, Damascus allowed Russian aid to reach the west of the city with fanfare and flags. Though a Russian reporter made it clear this was not destined for areas controlled by what he called terrorists. A Russian army colonel based near Aleppo claimed rebel gunmen would be allowed to leave if they surrendered. But while he was briefing Moscow by video link, the colonel's position came under attack. Rebels continued fighting in Hama further south as well, though any reduction in violence is surely a relief to many.
Jonathan Rugman there. Pauline Kafaki, the Scottish nurse infected by Ebola, potentially put the public at risk when she returned to the UK. A misconduct hearing has been told. But the Nursing and Midwifery Council accepted that Ms Kafaki had not acted dishonestly and the virus would have affected her ability to make decisions. The hearing continues. Campaigners demanding a public inquiry into the miners' protest at Orgreave in 1984 have been told they have to wait until October to find out whether it will happen, after a meeting with Home Secretary Amber Rudd. Our chief correspondent, Alex Thompson, is outside the Home Office now. So, Alex, what was their reaction after meeting the Home Secretary?
Well, after meeting her, they said it had been a very constructive, and I think they were quite surprised at how warm the reception was. Of course, the new Home Secretary. This is what one of the leading campaigners had to say, Barbara Jackson, when she came out to meet us about an hour ago here.
There's a new culture now, entirely different to the culture of the miners' strike. There's a culture of more openness and a willingness to get these old injustices dealt with. That was a very clear hint that we're in an entirely new era.
So why are they campaigning for inquiry then?
Well, the campaign for an inquiry surround Orgreave. It's not into the miners' strike, it's the police conduct. That's what they're interested in. It goes on two levels, specifically with regard to Orgreave itself. 95 miners were arrested. The trial simply collapsed because of lack of evidence. Well, as we reported last night, more evidence to the allegation that South Yorkshire Police that day. And let's have a look at some of the images to remind ourselves. Indelible images, these, of June the 18th, 1984, as thousands of pickets and thousands of striking miners and police confronted each other. The allegation is that South Yorkshire Police simply conducted a massive conspiracy to pervert the course of justice, manufacture statements, and certainly all the trials subsequently collapsed in court. more widely, here's the thing. This was the same chief constable as who would be in charge just 5 years later at the Hillsborough disaster. Some of the same senior officers, many of the same officers on the ground. Could it be that what happened at Orgreave, if there was this massive conspiracy, was exactly what happened on similar lines at Hillsborough? Now, Hillsborough, of course, is being very much investigated for precisely that allegation that the police conspired to tamper with and alter statements from their officers on that day. No such investigation has ever happened at Orgreave. Could it stand as a blueprint? And don't forget, this could well be one of the biggest, if not the biggest, such conspiracies to pervert the course of justice that we've ever seen in British history. That's what's at stake. We'll know by the end of October.
Alex, thank you very much. Now, it is tragically a crime which is all too common, leading to disfigurement, blindness, even death. Last year, more than 200 people in India were victims of acid attacks, and those are just the cases which are reported. Lakshmi Agarwal from Delhi was attacked when she was just a teenager by a man she refused to marry. But this week, she's been modelling on the catwalk ahead of London Fashion Week as part of a campaign to highlight violence against women across the world. Lakshmi could never have dreamed of sauntering down the catwalk 11 years ago. She was attacked with acid at a bus stop in Delhi by a man whose advances she'd turned down. She had to stay in hospital for 10 weeks. She lost an ear and has been permanently disfigured. She was then disowned by many of the people she knew. This catwalk show in the run-up to London Fashion Week sets out to raise awareness for vulnerable women. Just this week, 3 girls in eastern India were hospitalised after acid was thrown at them. There were over 200 reported cases in India last year, but attacks have taken place across the world. Earlier, I spoke to Lakshmi through a translator. When you cast your mind back to 11 years ago, straight after the attack happened, you can scarcely have imagined that you'd be doing this catwalk campaign.
फैक्ट है क्योंकि जब ये क्राइम हुआ तो सोसाइटी ने मुझे निकाल के एक तरीके से फेंक दिया अपने आप से और बाकी जो क्रिमिनल है उसको एक्सेप्ट कर लिया. मेरा जो क्रिमिनल था उसने जब अटैक किया आफ्टर 1 मंथ जब उसको बेल हुआ तो उसने सबसे पहला काम किया शादी. और उससे ही पता चलता है कि सोसाइटी क्या चाहती है. तो कभी नहीं सोच सकती थी कि ऐसा भी कभी कुछ होगा, तो लेकिन मैं बहुत खुश हूँ कि ऐसा हुआ है.
What do you hope to achieve by doing these catwalk shows, and this in particular? How are you trying to challenge the stereotypes of the fashion world and also traditional views on beauty?
First of all, अगर ब्यूटी इम्पॉर्टेंट होती तो आज मैं यहाँ नहीं होती. तो ब्यूटी का मीनिंग हम लोगों ने मिल के रखा हुआ है कि चेहरा बहुत इम्पॉर्टेंट है. मेरे ख्याल से इस चीज़ को जैसे हम लोगों ने बनाया कि चेहरा इम्पॉर्टेंट है, तो उसी चीज़ को हमें और आपको मिल के बदलना होगा कि चेहरा इम्पॉर्टेंट नहीं है. क्योंकि मैं सिर्फ अकेली ही नहीं, मेरे साथ बहुत सारी ऐसे एसिड अटैक सर्वाइवर्स थी, फाइटर्स थी जो बहुत चैलेंजेस फेस कर रही थी. तो हमें एक दूसरे को देख के बहुत स्ट्रेंथ मिली. और यही कहना चाहूँगी कि वी आर अ नॉट विक्टिम, वी आर अ फाइटर, एक्चुअली फाइटर. बट लेकिन हम क्यों फील करें कि हम लोग एक विक्टिम है. हम लोग एक नॉर्मल इंसान है और सर्वाइव कर रहे हैं और एक हमारा एक नाम है जिसे नाम लेके पुकारा जाए, ना कि विक्टिम कहा जाए.
Lakshmi talking to me earlier. Now, fans of the top-rating cookery show, The Great British Bake Off, are up in arms after its presenters, Mel and Sue, announced they wouldn't be staying on after it moves to Channel 4. The pair, who've hosted the show since it started in 2010, said they weren't going with the dough. It's thought Channel 4 outbid the BBC by £10 million to secure the deal. And talking of getting heated, parts of England have been sweltering on the hottest September day since 1911. Temperatures in Gravesend tipped 34.4 Celsius, making it hotter than Bangkok, Ibiza or Marrakesh. In Rio Paralympics, GB have won another 3 gold medals. Georgie Hermitage won the 400 metres T37 cerebral palsy class, some 10 metres clear of the field, and she also broke the world record. Former rugby player Rob Davies is GB's second table tennis Paralympic champion, winning the Class 1 singles event this afternoon. We'll be back at 7 tomorrow night. Until then, have a very good evening.